Hi, in this video I will be looking at the story The Letter A, which is an excerpt from the autobiography of Christy Brown's My Left Foot, which was published in 1954. So Christy Brown was born into a working class family in Dublin. He was born with a certain disabilities, because of which even at the age of 5 he could not sit, stand or even speak. But his parents were determined, especially his mother was so supportive right from his birth. And if we look at the story, it was all because of his mother's persistence and this never giving up attitude that he was able to become an accomplished writer and also a painter. So we'll be looking at the story, The Letter A, which is basically an excerpt from My Left Foot, the autobiography of Christy Brown. If you're interested, you can also go deeper into his autobiography, which is actually really interesting, and I would personally recommend the book. The story, The Letter A, is an excerpt. It is a small extract from the autobiography of Christy Brown's My Left Foot, which was published in the year. The story is an excerpt, a short extract from Christy Brown's autobiography My Left Foot, which was published in 1954. Let us look at Christy Brown as a person before we begin with the chapter. He was born on 5th June 1932 and died on 7th September 1981. Despite his disabilities, despite his problem with his physicality, he became a famous Irish writer and painter. Most notably, his autobiography My Left Foot, which was published in 1954. So from a very young age he had cerebral palsy. It is a permanent movement disorders that appear in early childhood. So what is cerebral palsy? It is basically, what you need to know is it is a group of permanent movement disorders that appear in early childhood. Signs and symptoms vary among people and over time. That is something which just let you know. So cerebral palsy is caused by abnormal development or damage to the parts of the brain that control movement, balance and posture. Most often the problems occur during pregnancy. So that's a little insight into what cerebral palsy is, because here Christy Brown suffered from a massive problem or a massive handicap, which is cerebral palsy. It is written in the form of a first person narrative, that is we. So that is first person narrative. I is first person narrative singular, we is first person narrative plural. So this is written in the form of a first person narrative singular I. So I is Christy Brown here. So he starts off with, I was born in the Rotunda Hospital on 5th June 1932 in Dublin. The hospital was established in 1745 in Ireland. It is one of the oldest maternity hospitals in the world. It was a difficult birth, and a whole army of relations, his relatives, near and dear ones, were around because the news was not good. His mother suffered immensely while giving birth, and they were praying furiously. They were praying so hard that he will be all right. After his birth, his mother was sent home to rest for some times, and he was kept in the hospital while she was away. So you might get a question like, why was he not baptized? So what you need to know is he was not baptized for about a week because his mother was sent home to rest because of the difficult birth, and he was kept in the hospital. So since he was kept in the hospital, there's no one to take him to the church for him to be baptized. So that is the reason why he was not baptized for some weeks. So as the days and weeks went by, it was his mother who first noticed that something was not right with him. After about 4 months, she noticed that his head had a habit of falling backward. And whenever she tried to feed him, she noticed that his head had a habit of falling backward whenever she tried to feed him. So what his mother does is attempt to correct this by placing her hand on the back of his neck to keep it steady. But as soon as she removes her hand, his head would fall backward again. So that was the first warning sign. So what is the first warning sign? The first warning sign was that he had a habit of falling backward. His head had a habit of falling backward whenever his mother tried to feed him. So that is the first warning sign. So after that, his mother was able to figure out some other defects as well. So some of the other defects where his hands will be clenched tightly, almost all the time, and were inclined to twine behind my back. His mouth could not grasp the teeth of the bottle because even at that early age, his jaws would either lock together tightly so that it was impossible for his mother to open them, or all of a sudden his limbs would fall loose, dragging his whole mouth to one side. At 6 months, he was not able to sit. So months passed by, and at 6 months, he could not sit up without having a mountain of pillows around him. And at 12 months, it was the same. So 1 year has passed by. Even after that, he was not able to stand up, or forget about standing up, he was not able to sit down. So very worried, his mother and father decided to seek for medical advice. They went to the doctors, and almost every doctor who saw and examined Christy Brown labeled him very interesting, in the sense that it was an interesting case, something which was not very common. It was new and hence interesting, but also a hopeless case. Interesting in the sense that it is something which is very new, not common, but also a hopeless case. A hopeless case because nothing could be done about it, about Christy Brown's defects. So almost every doctor who saw and examined Christy Brown labeled him very interesting, but also a hopeless case. And the doctors and many others very gently told her that he was mentally defective and he would remain so for the rest of his life. That was a hard blow to a mother who had already brought up 5 healthy children. The doctors were very sure that nothing could be done about Christy Brown's defect. They assured her that nothing could be done for Christy Brown. So what is interesting about Christy Brown's mother is that she refused to accept the truth, the inevitable truth. She was determined to help him in any way. She could not and would not believe that he was mentally defective, as the doctors had told her. She had nothing in this world. There's no one to support her. But he was not ready to give up. Though his body was crippled, she believed that his mind was absolutely fine. In spite of all the doctors and specialists who were against what she believed in, she was not ready to give up, and there's absolutely no doubt that her son was mentally defective. So his mother decided there and then to take matters into her own hands. He was her child and part of the family, and many advised Christy Brown's mother to take her to an institution, but she was not ready to do that. That will be a mistake for your own sake, they told her. Don't look to this boy as you will to others, as it will break your heart in the end. But luckily for Christy Brown, his mother and his father held out against a lot of them. But again, let us look at his mother. His mother was not just satisfied to say that he was not an idiot. She set out to prove it. Let me prove to others that my son is not an idiot. And she did this not because of any sense of duty, in sense that, oh, this is my son, even if I don't want to do it, since he is my son, I have to do it. I don't want to do it, but he is my son, I have to do it. Not something like that, but out of love. Remember, she is doing this out of immense love for her son, because of the unconditional love she has for her son. That is why she was so successful. So why was she so successful? She was so successful because she took care of her son, not because of any rigid sense of duty, but because of the unconditional love. So that is why she was so successful. That is something which you need to know. One cold December afternoon, Christy's brother and sister, Patty and Mona, were sitting huddled together with some torn school primers before them and doing some sums on an old chipped slate using a bright yellow chalk. This vivid yellow chalk showed up so well against the black surface of the slate that it caught Christy's attention as if it was gold. So without thinking or knowing that what he was doing, Christy reached out and took the yellow chalk from his sister's hand with his left foot and scribbled on the slate. That was a turning point. Though the turning point was on one cold December afternoon, Christy Brown grabbed this yellow chalk from his sister's hand with his left foot and scribbled on the slate. When Christy drew the letter A, his mother's face lit up and tears rolled down her cheeks. His father showed his happiness by lifting him up on his shoulders, while everyone stopped talking and staring and stared at him. Mona and his sister stared at him with an open mouth and our great big eyes open wide. Again, the letter A is not only the first letter of the series of alphabets, but also the first vowel. Here it represents the beginning of the learning process in Christy's life that finally changes his life. Christy would never have succeeded without the help of his family, because all his relatives, friends, and even the doctors had given up hope that he would ever become normal and recuperate from his critical illness. All had discouraged his mother, but she never gave up on him. She looked after him with patience and great care, and never let him feel that she was not with him. After many years of hardships, he became a famous writer, painter, and poet. So that is, a striking example, or a remarkable example of what a mother's love can do to a child. Again, let us look at Chris's mother. Chris's mother was not ready to give him up so easily, right from the very beginning. She remained worried, and when the doctors told her that her son was an idiot and an imbecile, she did not accept him as strange or queer. She fought against sending him to an institution and cared for him at home, keeping him surrounded by a family that loved him and hoped for him. The warmth and humanity in his loneliness was only a mother's thought of keeping the child at home. Many advised her to send him to an institution. It will be the best for everyone, for you. But she was adamant. She was against that. No, never. I will never send my son to an institution. You know what? I'm going to look after him. Not out of any rigid sense of duty, but out of love. And I'm going to take care of him, and I'm going to prove every one of you wrong. And she was right. So that is so admirable about Christy Brown's mother. Chris's mother was very patient. As we can see, when Christy was 4 months old and could not hold his head while being fed, she would gently held his neck for support to feed him. She also told him Christmas stories and asked questions and talked to him as if he was normal. She was also very sympathetic even when Christy never responded to her. She showed affection, and she would often devote her time talking to him even though Christy never responded. She always treated him like a part of the family and tried to prove to all the relatives and friends that he was not an idiot. She loved her son so much that she refused to send him to any institution and was fiercely protective. That was why she was so successful as a mother. So again, let us look at the remarkable thing which happened in Christy Brown's life. One afternoon, one cold December afternoon, he was attracted by this yellow chalk. That is, he unconsciously grabbed the chalk out of his sister's hand. He held it tightly between his toes and wrote carelessly on the slate. Every family member was curious. When his mother came and saw this, she knelt before him and drew a single letter A on the floor in front of him and asked him to copy it. He tried it with the chalk. It produced a crooked line. He tried again and drew two sides of the letter. The chalk broke out. He wanted to give up and throw the chalk away. He was growing impatient. I can't do this. He was trying his best. He was sweating. And he was giving all his strength to write the letter A, but it was so difficult. And he wanted to throw the chalk away out of impatience. When he wrote the letter A, his mother knew that it was a sign of intelligence and not just an imitative gesture, because Christy had done it with intense effort. So tears rolled out of her eyes. This had opened his road to mental freedom. So now he will be able to express his desires and thoughts through words. Thus he was able to break the wall between him and other people. That is the immense step, one giant leap of Christy Brown into the world.